Hello and welcome to another weekly diagnosis, the show where I talk about all the nerdy stuff going on up here. This week I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite games ever, and a game that has more editions than the goddamn encyclopedia, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. What spurred this idea in my head to review a game that came out over a decade, you may ask? Well, I recently got bored and ended up on Nexus, where I came across mod collections, which I will say are an awesome step forward in making modding more accessible. Over 700 plugins installed in like 1.5 hours, and only one crash in several extended play periods. I mean, come on, that's good for vanilla Skyrim. Anyway, the reason I'm doing this nearly 11-year late review is that I'm playing Skyrim again, and my god, it is just fantastic. There's only one place to start when reviewing a game like Skyrim, and that is the world of Skyrim itself. To this day, there's not a video game world that I have enjoyed exploring more than Skyrim. Skyrim's world is dense, alive, and interactive. You can't wander for too long in Skyrim without coming across something interesting, whether it is one of the 100 of marked locations or a group of vampires disguised as danger hunters. The density of Skyrim is also not just due to the marked locations, because there are numerous things you can discover in between, which helps make Skyrim interesting and feel like a real world. The random encounters also help make Skyrim feel like a living world, and obviously, being able to interact with nearly everything is what makes a Bethesda game, and that is especially true for Skyrim. The level of interactivity, even with today's standards, is really only beaten by a handful of open world games, and this extends to looting, talking to NPCs, and just moving things around. I mean, who hasn't put a cauldron on top of a shopkeeper's head and then stolen everything in their store? Let's move on to the writing in Skyrim. If I describe the writing in Skyrim with one word, it would be serviceable. I wouldn't say that Skyrim is anything too inventive in the writing category, but I adore the world and lore that was created through its writing. When you think of memorable quotes in Skyrim, most of them are just memes.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
But there are a few pieces of dialogue here and there that stand out.
What is better, to be born good, or to overcome your evil nature through great effort?
The main plot is a kind of a generic fantasy story that has pieces of really interesting lore here and there that aren't specifically expanded upon unless you're reading all those books you pick up in the open world. I'd say the best story arcs lie within the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood, as they both have interesting twists to keep them from being extremely straightforward. Also, Bethesda continued their trend of saving some of their best stuff for their DLC, because Dragonborn and Dawnguard are awesome, and both have more creative storylines than the OG Skyrim. As I said before, the writing serves its purpose in a game that to me is more about exploring than anything else. Now let's talk about the gameplay of Skyrim, which I did touch on a little bit when I was talking about interactivity, and I'm here to say that Skyrim's gameplay is not only good, but it is great. Sure, it can kind of just boil down to hacking and slashing, but honestly, I love that shit, and Skyrim's hacking and slashing is at least fun. There's also plenty of ways to play Skyrim, and to the chagrin of traditional RPG fans, the game even lets you change up your playstyle mid-playthrough. To me, this keeps the game fresh in a playthrough that can last literally hundreds of hours. But hey, if you want to stick to your laurels and be a two-handed warrior the whole time, guess what? You can. Now obviously, the gameplay isn't perfect, but I feel as though it has aged quite well. My main two problems with the gameplay are magic and third person. The base magic system has always been underwhelming, and the third person gameplay was decent for the time, but is rough to go back to with today's standards. So first person it is. Overall, Skyrim is an excellent game that is still as fun to go back to as it was 11 years ago, and few games since have matched the wonder that the world of Skyrim brings about. That is all for this week's diagnosis. Let me know what you think about Skyrim in the comments, like, subscribe, all that fancy stuff, and as always, thanks for watching.